Hello everyone, this is Lee, and in this video I'll be describing the process behind my latest map. As proud as I am of the final product, I'm just as excited to share everything that went into it, and hopefully this will be of some interest to all of you. If any of you find this helpful for your own map making, then I'll be glad for that too. Alright, so to begin, after receiving my client's original sketch of this map and discussing all the important bits, I began by tracing over the coastlines and rivers in a new layer, and made certain adjustments along the way. After both my client and myself were satisfied with this layout, I moved on to establishing the temperatures and directions of the major ocean currents. Then, I mapped out the average annual temperature of the waters. To do this, I used the gradient tool, creating a gradient which was deep blue on both ends and magenta in the exact center, and in a new layer, I stretched it down over the image. I then used the smudge tool to push these temperature representing colors around in a way that roughly corresponded to the ocean currents. With the raster mask applied, you can see the land masses, and then here it is without it. This is the image I would edit to establish the land temperatures, seen here, once again using the smudge tool, as well as the brush tool to appropriately alter the temperature gradient. And here are both the land and ocean temperature maps combined with a helpful outline. The temperature map was then saved as a PNG, and I moved on to the average annual precipitation map. This started out as a solid gray image, which was then worked with the burn and dodge tools to represent higher and lower precipitation levels. I found a precipitation map online and referenced its key to create a new gradient map adjustment layer over that, which made it easier to compare this world to our own and also added some nice color. With the adjustment layer applied, I was able to keep lightening and darkening the original layer beneath that, and the changes translated in real time. I then saved that as a PNG, started trying to map out the biomes using this and the temperature map, and got halfway through that before I realized that I really needed to account for the mountains, so I made an elevation map, starting by isolating the mountains from the map my client provided me, and using the smudge, blur, dodge, burn, and brush tools to shape that into this. The first thing I wanted to figure out was the rain shadow effect of these mountains, so I duplicated the layer and applied the emboss filter, first at a 0-degree angle, and then repeating the process at 180 degrees, resulting in two maps, one showing the rain shadow effect with westward winds, and the other with eastward winds. To apply these to the precipitation map, having unfortunately lost track of the PSD file and having only the PNG on hand, I first had to desaturate and invert the colored precipitation map, recreate the gradient map adjustment layer, and again use the burn and dodge tools on the grayscale layer to make it match the colored PNG. Satisfied with that recovery, I then copy-pasted the plain elevation map into the precipitation map file, in between the grayscale and gradient map layers, and I then inverted it, set the layer mode to multiply, hid the gradient map layer, and saved the resulting image. Finalizing the precipitation map required a few steps after this. The first was to copy-paste both of the rain shadow maps into new layers of the recently saved image. Then I applied raster masks to the rain shadow layers so they corresponded to the right prevailing wind directions for each latitude. Obviously, these are really oversimplified. The winds in a given circulation cell won't all be blowing due east or due west, but this worked for the time limit I put on myself. Next, I set both layers to linear light, and lowered their opacities, and that was that. Then I duplicated this layer to go over the rain shadow layers, made it mostly invisible, and then made certain parts more opaque to sort of lessen the effect of some of the rain shadows. I really should have just done that in the raster masks for these layers, supposing I should have done it in the first place, but for some reason I didn't do it that way. I then added a layer with the rivers to represent a sort of ground-level moisturizing effect more than precipitation per se, and then another layer with an updated coastline, because that was sort of a mess from the way I drew the rivers initially. Then I copied the gradient map into this file under the coastline correction layer, and saved the resulting image, as well as the PSD. The process for updating the annual average temperature map was much simpler. For that, I added a new layer over the temperature map, made it the same deep blue as the coldest temperature areas, added a raster mask, copy-pasted the elevation into the raster mask, and lowered the opacity to lessen its intensity somewhat. And that was that. I was ready to move on to biomes. To do that, I created a new file with the final precipitation map, temperature map, and elevation map as the first 3 layers. With those set in place, the magic wand tool would be the next major player. To establish the tropical rainforest, for example, I first went to the temperature map layer, and with the tool set to unite, not anti-alias, not contiguous, and with a roughly 15% tolerance, I clicked around and selected the brightest magenta parts of that map corresponding to the highest temperature. Without deselecting, I then went to the precipitation map layer, with the wand tool having all the same presets except intersect instead of unite, and selected the darkest purple parts of that map, corresponding to the highest precipitation. In this way, I had a selected area that contained only the very hottest and very wettest regions of the map. Still without deselecting, I then created a new layer, applied a raster mask to it, which automatically filled the selected parts in with white, and left the non-selected parts black, and then colored the layer itself a dark, saturated, slightly bluish green. I repeated this process for all of the other biomes, with varying tolerances and selecting different temperature, precipitation, or elevation ranges, and of course using different colors. These layers can be edited just by toying with the raster mask, selecting different parts of any of the 3 background layers, or from other biome layers for that matter, and adding or subtracting that from the biome. It's also possible to make parts of a biome layer translucent, to show a sort of transition zone between one biome and an adjacent one in the layer beneath it, by selecting a certain area on the border between those biomes, going to the raster mask, and filling the selection in with gray instead of black or white, which you can see in just a couple of the biomes here. I also had another layer above everything else, containing the rivers, which you saw turned on and turned off in the post I made for this project. And that's pretty much it. I'm fairly sure that I covered all the important steps to the best of my ability. I hope you find this interesting. Let me know what you think. I've been Lee. This has been my process video, and this is me closing it out. Bye now.